We need to do this, Anaya, to do interviews in the hot tub. That's something cool.
Yeah. Do we exhale through our nose or exhale through our mouth?
It just depends on what we're doing. If you're sitting at your desk,
Okay.
it's better to go through the nose because it's slower. Why is that better? It keeps you in your parasympathetic, your relaxed state.
Today, we are thrilled to have Gabrielle Reece, a volleyball legend, fitness leader, podcast host, corporate speaker, New York Times bestselling author, wife and mother. Gabby's accomplishments span from being a former professional beach volleyball player and Nike's first female spokeswoman to co-founding Laird Superfood and creating her own fitness training program.
I'm going to guess taller than both of you.
Oh, definitely.
Right. So
How is it working with your husband? Because a lot of people, they disagree that you have to work with your husband or wife together.
we don't really offend each other more than like 8 times a day.
Push-ups or pull-ups?
Both. I've trained my mettle. I've got some mettle. I know how to stand. Nature or work is savage.
The Avenue of the Strongest is a podcast dedicated to exploring the lives and experiences of the most inspiring individuals from around the world. Each episode features interviews with fascinating guests who share their insights and wisdom on a variety of topics, including education, impact, motivation, health, and learning. Here are your hosts, Anayet Chowdhury and Vlad Suleiman.
Today, we are thrilled to have Gabrielle Reece. Gabby, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Vlad. Thanks for having me. And you can call me Gabby. We'll make it easy.
Sure, thank you. Gabby, I want to start from the beginning. Can you share with us the early influences in your life that led you to pursue a career in sports and fitness?
I think a lot of people all have stories, and certainly our childhood really imprints something heavy on every person. And I didn't have, let's say, the most conventional home family life. I actually grew up for many years with a different family. Um, and my father passed away when I was 5 and things like that. But what I will say is I always seemed to have very supportive adults and alternative adults in my life, whether it was friends of my family, and then as I got older, coaches, and even the supportive teammates that were really, I think, impactful for my choices as far as continuing to compete. And then, listen, I would be lying if I said the fact I'm relatively tall for a woman. I'm 6'3". I think, I've said this a lot to people. I think we all have low cards and high cards. And
Mm.
it's really understanding what are your high cards in that situation that you can play that will support maybe long-term goals or dreams that people might have. And in my case, athletics was a way to be a part of something. I really enjoyed who I was when I was in that environment, working hard and discipline and maybe learning new a skill that I didn't have that I had to work hard to develop. And certainly use those to kind of continue through life, because at the end I don't think it's about playing sport or playing chess. It's about who we become through that process that's so important. So I would say it was really adults, a few teachers, and definitely in my case coaches.
This podcast is sponsored by ArgoPrep, an award-winning edtech company serving over 1 million students nationwide. We understand that as parents, you want to ensure that your child receives the best education possible. Say hello to ArgoPrep. With over 15 plus educational awards earned in just the past year, ArgoPrep's platform offers your child video lessons, quizzes, drills, printable worksheets, and more. Best of all, your ArgoPrep subscription comes included with 4 comprehensive digital workbooks that cover all 4 subjects: math, ELA, science, and social studies. Visit argoprep.com today and start your free trial.
Mhm. I want to transition to one of the main components of any fitness program, which I think is mental health, as it is crucial to prioritize it alongside the physical health. With that in mind, Gabby, I would love to hear your insights. Can you share your top 3 tips for maintaining a balanced and healthy lifestyle that integrates both physical and mental well-being?
Absolutely. I think, I always say that in a way, a cheating, easier way to have a healthier mind is to have a healthier body. And whether we like it or not, we're an organism. And so certainly by taking care of ourselves physically, it makes it much easier to obtain some kind of homeostasis or mental health or mental sense of well-being or safety that a lot of people maybe struggle with. So what I would say from the physical side is food, and nobody really loves this, but it's really 80% of the game. It's when they talk about food as medicine, it can also be the other. So if we're sitting there and having a lot of processed foods or high sugar foods or, kind of we call them empty calories, fake food where we're eating, but we don't feel satisfied. So I would just encourage people to realize, first of all, they're unique. So to find the foods that you could actually eat in a real way, not just follow, quote, a diet, but it's like, hey, what are the
Mm.
things I really like that are good for me that I could do on a more regular basis? So, just getting a relationship with food and taking time. I think everyone's like, well, I'm too busy. Making this a priority because we anything that is important to us, we can get done. So certainly food. Second, community connection. If you're talking about real health, I think we need to be connected to people and have it doesn't have to be a lot of people. It's not about, the quantity. It's just about having those few quality people that you think, hey, they care about me. I have someone to call if I'm having a tough go. And then again, this is a very simplistic overview, but a sense of purpose. I think,
Mm,
purpose, I think we devalue or we don't value enough that it's important for us all to contribute in any way that we're able and who we are uniquely. And so, we could get into a million physical practices like walking and keep breathing with your mouth closed. Unless you're on a track sprinting, we should all be nose breathing, period.
mm,
And I won't get into the science of that unless, of course, you want me to. But I believe that if we feel safe and connected, I think it makes it easier to pursue these other things and having a purpose where every day on the days that we don't feel like getting out of bed, we have a reason and just really having a healthful relationship with the stuff we're putting in our bodies.
so we should be breathing in through our nose, but how about exhaling? Do we exhale through our nose or exhale through our mouth?
So there's a couple ways to look at this. If you're doing an exercise, for example, and your CO2 is rising, there is a way to offload your CO2 through your mouth to quickly get rid of it. So the next air that you're getting in is clean and oxygenating. So it just depends on what we're doing. If you're sitting at your desk,
Okay.
it's better to go through the nose because it's slower. Why is that better?
Mm,
It keeps you in your parasympathetic, your relaxed state. That is a lot of the issues for a lot of people. They're constantly in their sympathetic, they're anxious, they're revved up, they're
mm,
shallow breathed area. So they do it in there through the chest. So if you think about through the mouth, it's like in and out through the chest. These are short
yeah.
and more breaths per minute. What we want to do whenever we can is make these breaths less but longer per
Mm,
minute. It's also really, really good for your health because your CO2 needs to be a little bit high in your system in order to actually absorb the oxygen into the cells and tissue. So what happens
mm,
is if you're sitting there breathing all the time with your mouth, you're scrubbing your CO2. So you actually don't
okay.
get the oxygen that's in your bloodstream already. So this is like free, cheap, and you could do it
Right.
anywhere. Nobody has to know about it. But there is ways to use mouth breathing, like say you have a big meeting or a competition or
Right.
something that you can kind of activate your system. But if we're just talking about better for most people, it's in and out through the nose.
Okay, I love that, and it's so funny because we're talking. As soon as you start talking things about this, I started questioning myself. How do I breathe when I sit down? Am I breathing in and out through my nose? I definitely am, but
But also think
uh,
about what's hard because we sit all day. So it's hard for us to
yeah.
get into our bellies and our diaphragm. So what I would also say to people, for example, is if we're sitting on a chair, it's called the C curve. We don't want to be in a C curve. If we actually sit up, now we can
Hmm.
take a full breath down into our bellies. And we
Mm,
also have greater range of motion, and your spine is activated. And so there's a number of things. That's why standing or sitting on a ball or just sitting off the back of your chair when you can think of it, or a chair with, like a bar stool without a back, is
Right,
in the
right.
long run probably better.
Okay. And I want to go back very briefly to food versus exercise, diet versus exercise. And you definitely are 1000% correct, which is food is the name of the game. It's really 80%. I mean, I don't know exactly the percent, but it's majority of it. Like if you're not having a good diet, if you're not eating right, no
Mm,
matter how much you're in the gym, it's it's not going to work out. Now, I so for people that struggle with choosing the right amount of food, or even the fact that, let's just say, individuals that cannot control themselves to eat a portion, right? Do you have any advice for that? Do you have any advice? How can we, what's a easy or some steps to better portion control eat?
mhm. This is a complicated topic because a lot of times for people, food is actually a drug. So let's say
Mm,
someone's experiencing high stress or they have sort of
yeah,
something unresolved. They're using oftentimes food as a medication. And the thing is, we
yeah,
can't say don't eat. So it's this thing that we have
right.
to do a few times a day. And a lot of us have a tricky relationship with. So I think first it would be understanding, am I hungry? Why am I eating? And just being in touch with your own feelings. You don't have to talk to anyone about this. You just need to go, hey, am I stressed out and that's why I'm grabbing this? Um, oh, or is it something else? And let's say things are checking out, you seem to be pretty good with it. It would be really starting with something fibrous as the center, the hero of your meal, which is hard for a lot of us
Mm,
to do. And then if we do eat animal protein, a lot of people are, vegan or vegetarian. Maybe they don't. So for those guys, it would be making sure they're getting enough fat, good fat, so they feel satisfied. Because otherwise, that can tend to not feeling full or satisfied, satiated. So we keep eating. And the other reason we keep eating is we're not really getting nutrients. So this again gets a little techie with micro and
mm,
macronutrients, but
right.
it's sort of saying, okay, do I have fiber? Do I have some kind of vegetables? Is there a fat? Is there an avocado or some nuts or a good oil like an olive oil or an avocado oil or coconut oil? And not being afraid of those kinds of
Mm,
things, but also skewed towards what you want. Now, if somebody is like they're continuing to overeat, it's either because they're not getting the nutrition they need because nobody overate a salad in their life, right? Um, or is
right.
something else going on? Do they need to talk to somebody? They need to get some help
Yeah.
because,
Mm,
this is a really important dance. And we also get into this cycle where we get addicted to food. The
yeah.
chemists do a really good job of putting enough sort of chemistry in our food where they say, it hits the
Yeah.
palate harder than anything in nature and leaves very quickly. What does that lead to? That's why they
Yeah.
say you can't just eat one, overeating.
Mm,
And sugary drinks will kick your butt in a real way because if there's no fiber in these drinks, and there's no such thing as 0 calories and, sugar-free. This is a total myth by what it happens once it gets into the body. So people think, "Oh, I'm okay." But a lot of that stuff goes straight to the liver if there's no fiber. That's why you eat
wow.
fruit, good to go, right? You've got fiber, has to go into the microbiome. It doesn't all go straight to the liver. Fatty liver often comes from either highly processed foods with no fiber that are high in sugar or glucose. I know it gets a little technical. I would like to keep it simple so people don't feel intimidated by it, but that's why real food,
Mm,
and then if you want to take it a step further, if you
yeah.
had your plate, you do your fiber first, then your protein, and then whatever carbohydrate. If people are eating a sweet potato or if they're into grains or whatever, eat that last. Because
Okay.
what you find with health a lot of times, or at least especially the people I talk to over and over, and they all say the same things, whether I'm talking to a GI specialist, an endocrinologist, um, a psychologist, all these people, a lot of these symptoms derive from the same issue. It just shows up differently in different people. So diabetes might be caused by really the same things that people feel that feel anxiety. So it's chronic inflammation. It's probably not enough sleep. It's mitochondrial dysfunction. So your cells aren't, getting to work correctly. And,
Right.
there's just a few kind of culprits that really kind of just create all kinds of havoc on our system. And so that's why, for example, people will be eating and doing calorie restrictions and all these things and not losing weight. Because if their
Mm,
hormones are off from being
right.
insulin resistant or something else,
Yeah.
they don't ever really get a chance to get in front of it.
Yeah. Wow. Can you define? Let's touch on sleep real quick for
Mm.
you. I mean, there's so many studies, but how many hours should an 18-year-old be sleeping for?
I'm really careful to deal with absolutes, and
Okay.
I'm not a doctor, but
Right.
certainly people would argue uh, y- 6, 7 to 8, 9 would be great. Everybody's different. What's their activity load? How do they eat? Things like that. But this whole notion of 8 hours is probably a decent gauge or
Mm,
goal. And it's very hard because people think, oh, well, I'll go to bed at 1 and I can get up at 9. And whether we like it or not, just because we have our telephones and we have all this technology, we are connected to the sun. We are
yeah.
animals. And this whole idea of circadian rhythm is a real thing. And I know that we're all trying to figure out ways around it, but we're not there yet.
No, that's a really good point. Thanks for bringing that up. So,
Yeah,
sorry, Vaughn, you wanted to say something?
yeah, I have one more. I would like Gabby to give a little bit of clarification for those who uh, heard sugar free is not free. So what it means, the Coke sugar free is not sugar free. Could you please explain to the for those who are believing it?
Sure. So, I mean, I do find it funny that we're still talking about these things because we have these chemical sweeteners. But what we don't realize is a lot of times they do wreak havoc on our hormonal systems and our ability to be insulin sensitive. And also how the item is converted in the body. It may be 0 calories in the can, but the way we process it in our bodies typically and how we store it is in fat,
Is where
right?
mm,
So
wow.
I think because if we have a fuel floating around in our system from this drink that we don't use, it will then get stored. So I think people, and listen, I believe that we all know. We just don't really want to hear it because I like my things so much. And I get
Yeah.
it, but maybe it's just about being at least honest with yourself so you can manage these things as they're in your life. That's all. It's like going, "Hey, you know
Mm,
what? I worked hard. I've been eating really good and I'm going to drink this and I'm going to enjoy it." But at least having that direct conversation with yourself because I don't believe that shame moves the needle towards anything positive anyway. So this is not about shame because that's never helped
right.
any person in their life. But it's just about having enough information, being really honest with yourself, and, kind of going from there.
Mm. As someone who has experienced and explored various wellness practices, are there any lesser known or unconventional methods that you found particularly effective for maintaining your overall health or well being?
Well, the good news is they're pretty consistent. So the good news is, like, if you move and you can walk, I will tell you, um, w some very basic things. Walking is underrated. I think if people really walked, and they call it zone 2, if you will, in the
Hmm.
cardio world. It's not about killing yourself and huffing and puffing. It's just sort of having these times that you're moving your body in a long but a little peppy way, if you will. Men probably need to eat more fiber. Women probably need to lift more weight. But if you're talking about like fringe sort of interesting things, what you start seeing is fringe ends up just becoming a new interpretation of, the way monks were breathing 1,000 years ago, or
Right.
a broth that somebody's grandmother it was part of their everyday life. So feasibly, I don't really think there's anything new. I think there's people
Mm,
doing good work. But I don't think because our biology is pretty pretty consistent and pretty the
right.
same. So the things that really
Right.
support us water, hydration, sleep,
Right.
love, a hug. Touch is very important. If you want to
Mm.
talk about calming someone's nervous system, there is pretty much no quicker way than touch.
Wow. Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
there's just these things where maybe when we're ready to hear it, then we can implement it. So it's just about having the conversations over and over and keep making the invitation to people to invest in themselves.
Mm.
And also if they're having a hard time, kind of navigating certain things, whether it's food or losing some weight or what have you, is them putting the effort into figuring out, hey, what's going to work really for me long term, not in this, because nobody
Right.
likes doing, oh, I did a crash diet and then I'm back to, that's not a great thing for people. So I think for me, it's like, hey, what are the long term goals and how do we get there in the long term?
No, I love that advice. I want to quickly switch gears and talk about the Gabby Reece Show. So, what inspired you to create your podcast, and talk a little bit about your guests and topics that you talk about on your podcast?
Well, so when I was playing competing volleyball, I used to do a TV show called MTV Sports, and I did a bunch of other television shows, and I always interviewed athletes. And I really liked learning. I called it forced learning. I was learning from them, getting inspired by them,
Hmm.
secretly learning things for myself. And so the medium for the podcasting was a way to have these longer conversations with really smart people. But the whole idea was, hey, how do we take the sharp end of the stick information? I have three daughters. I only have one at home now. I've been in a long marriage. I'm trying to figure out how to take care of myself. Compared to your audience, I'm middle aged. It's like, I understand what it's like to deal with a lot. We have companies, I fall short and am struggling to figure it out all the time in some ways. Is how do we take
Mm.
this best in class information for real, but make it feel achievable? And so that was the real goal of that. And again, it's back to forced learning. Most of my guests write books or they're really smart, so I have to kind of pay attention and stay on top of it. And I just thought it was a really good environment, and I thought I at least could be a person that could take this high end information and try to make it approachable. I always say third to sixth grade level because people are busy.
Right.
If
Right.
you do a morning ritual that takes 37 minutes, no one's going to do it.
Yep.
So like if you were going to
Yeah.
invest in vitamins, give me the like, what are the ones I really need? Like,
Right.
don't give me 25, So I
Right.
think it was that hope because I've had the gift coming from sports of making health a priority by accident.
Mm.
And I think
Right.
it's something that my hope is for other people to feel as good as they can.
Yeah, wow, that's absolutely incredible. And similar here, I find ourselves. This is really why we do the podcast. It's really professional development for ourselves because a lot goes into creating a podcast. So again, I always sit here and say we are extremely grateful for every single guest that come on. We've had incredible guests, and it's every time like you're the first person over here that we've had on the podcast that is specific in your field. And so it's such an amazing learning experience. But then, of course, the second part, which you said, was to make it easy and digestible for your audience as well. I think that's very important.
Yeah, and listen, I think it's important to
Yeah,
remind people perfect isn't the goal.
Yeah.
It's not the goal. Perfect.
the
Our
the
best is the
journey is,
goal.
yeah, the journey itself also have to be pleasurable. It's not always the result. So the journey of the recording podcast, speaking with people, this what brings the joy as well. So now I want to speak about the superfood. So your company, Laird Superfood, can you tell us more about it and how you and Laird Hamilton developed the idea of this company?
So, my husband is named Laird Hamilton. Laird is a professional athlete. Unlike me, he is not retired. And he was doing these concoctions for many, many years about using coffee as a way for performance. And what can I put in my coffee that I can surf longer and maybe even put some good ingredients like adaptogens or whatever. And by the way, this is not new, right? There was um, Bulletproof was putting fat in coffee. Yak butter tea is
Mm.
something that was drank for years and years. But Laird was doing
Yeah.
his own version. Some friends were like, this, he'd always give it to his friends when they'd come to train with him. And, before you knew it, someone's like, you should share this with other people. So in 2015, the company was created officially. And it was sort of, we've had other businesses. And in fact, we have even other businesses now, but we've had businesses that have failed and such. So let me be clear that this is a business that the timing was right, and it was completely by accident. We were not that smart, but it was just one of those. But also, I think it was because we had the other businesses that it was like, oh, okay, now
Mm.
you're coming here. So just I think that's important, especially if you have somebody who is going to start anything. Failure seems to be also part of the formula. So the company was in the right place. We had a factory in Oregon, and so it's a non-dairy coffee and creamer company. We've got turmeric creamer and mocha, and unsweetened, and all kinds of flavors. We have very high quality beans. We have vegan proteins, but the whole idea is, how can we keep it as clean as possible? It's very hard to do, to keep things shelf stable and
Mm.
not cost prohibitive. It's virtually impossible. Like, we made a protein bar that has half the sugar of other very good bars, and things like no sunflower or tocopherols, which are things, an oil that they use. So, it's hard to do business this way, I'll be honest.
Right.
It is.
Right.
But in our minds, and we've been together for 27 years, and Laird is even more intense about this than me. If we can't do it and feel good about sharing it, and we wouldn't eat it
Mm.
ourselves, you can't
Right.
bother. No zero is
Yeah.
worth it. It just, and for other
Yeah.
people it's different. But we were very fortunate, and we took the company went public in September of 20. It was great for a while. Then the market crashed. The stock. This is the other sides of the education, right? We did the road show.
Yep.
We did the whole thing. So this is all part of it, which we're grateful for that experience. And now the company is doing very well, but it is tricky when you're in the market. It's and it's great though. I love the creativity of being in a company like this, and what's been fun is for Laird, who can't really share the experience of riding a big wave with people. That most people, most of us, I'm not going to know what it feels like. But when a lady comes up to him and says, "Oh, she uses his instant latte or his, matcha this or whatever,"
Yeah.
he likes that because he comes from Hawaii. And, it's like all cultures, there's these sharing elements. Like, come here, let me give you what
Yeah.
I have. And so I
Yeah.
see him
Yeah.
get a real kick out of it. It's
Mm.
been a really beautiful journey. Not easy, but beautiful.
Yeah. Well, thank you for
And how's
highlighting
it?
the not easy part.
What the hell is easy? That's what I always laugh, like, when people are
Yeah.
like, "It's so hard." I'm like, we should teach young people that hard is part of, and that we can't be
Yeah.
afraid of it. And yes, sometimes you sort of need to go talk to someone and go, "Man, I'm having self-doubt and I worry." I have stayed up at night many times worrying about it all. So I'm not acting like,
Mm.
"Oh, yeah, whatever. I'm used to hard." I've trained
Yeah.
my we call it, medaling up. I've trained my medal. I've got some medal. I know how to stand. I've lost plenty, play a sport and, you lose a lot. One time, Laird is very good at what he does in the water, right? And he told me a story that one time he paddled out. And unlike other athletes, he sometimes will be with the general population, right? You wouldn't normally get to play
Mm.
basketball with like there's, Michael Jordan or whatever. He paddles out and
Right.
some guy says to him, "I saw you fall." And Laird goes, "You saw me fall?" He's like, "I've fallen on more waves than you've ridden."
Yeah.
And I think it's people reminding themselves, like, but that's what's so satisfying, and that's where we get all our education. How would I know something if I didn't have to lose a little to figure it out or do it wrong?
1000%. I think it's so important to highlight the failures because a lot of the times when we you get guests on, and you, even if you scroll social media, it's all about inspiration and motivation. And if you, with just hard work, you can achieve that. But no one, I mean, people do talk about it, but I think there needs to be an emphasis of all the struggles as well. It's extremely hard. Some
Yeah.
days it will be great, some days it will be bad, some days it will be horrible, some days it will be okay. So I mean, that's so my. Thank you for highlighting that though, because I find that often people generally don't talk about that, or you know, so thank you for that, because I think it is critical, especially for the younger people to actually to actually listen to this.
For younger people too, though, is don't confuse, like, I'm an optimist and I am a dreamer, even though I am very much a realist. So with all of that, it doesn't have to be an either or, like everything is perfect and here's just do these 10 things, or yeah, it's really hard. It's like, what's the tone of, hey, it's hard and it's all possible. And
Mm,
kind of
yeah.
living in the world of those, and reminding young people too, like nature or work is savage. And so I don't care, now we live in a time where, it shows up at your door and you can order everything and da 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 da. It's still, no matter what, if you're going to be in this world, you're not really going to escape that.
Mm.
And how's it working with your husband? Because a lot of people, they disagree that you have to work with your husband or wife together.
Uh, I wish I could say that we're so emotionally evolved. I think we have a very good chemistry, and we have very good different skill sets. So we don't really offend each other, more than like 8 times a day. It's like we're not really stepping on each other's
Yeah.
toes. I think there's a lot of trust there. There's good communication. Laird jokes that it's in the military, it's a, oh, I forget what they call it, like MDE, or mutually destructive. It's like we're constantly, there's such a mutual respect, and in a way both of us are just mean enough that we're just nice all the time,
Yeah.
Mm.
because it's not worth it,
Oh, that's
if that
Yeah.
makes sense. Um, so I think it's about communication. But listen, there's nothing better. I would imagine it's the same with like siblings. If you can really kind of find those rhythms more times than not, um, it's pretty cool to have somebody that, like, hey, they get me, they know my taste, they
Mm.
know what I like, and they have my back.
Yeah.
I love that. I wish more couples would be having same chemistry as you are with your husband.
And, another
Um,
notion of this is somebody
yeah.
sometimes is the flower and somebody's the farmer, and sometimes you switch roles. And just for people to remember that, you guys know this, and when you work together, sometimes it's like, hey, you're going to shine a light on that person and it's going to be about them. And
Mm.
sometimes the light's going to come to you. So I think if people feel comfortable moving up and back and doing all that, I think that's healthy
Mm.
too.
Mhm. When I would like to transfer to the fitness topic. So when the word fitness comes, it's often perceived that men dominate this field. Maybe I'm
Sure.
wrong, but anyway, as a pioneer in the sports and fitness world, what challenges have you faced as a woman in these industries, and how you overcome them?
Vlad, I'll be honest with you. I None really. Yeah, you have to know too. And it took me a while to learn this. Because of my physical size, I'm also allowed to coach men.
Mhm.
I'm going to guess taller than both of you.
Oh, definitely.
Right. So, I learned techniques from great coaches, even my female coaches, that when you're in these positions of, hey, we're just talking about information, I learned a communication skill set where it's like, "Hey, this is just the information." And I've even learned, like, physical gestures where, I might put my hand on someone's shoulder. Like, there's ways too that you kind of know that, I heard a great quote, "They don't want you to be in charge, they want you to be in control." So, it's just understanding, like, "Hey, what are we doing?" We're talking about movement, and we're talking, maybe if we're talking about sports, we're talking about aggression. So it's being appropriate in the appropriate environment, but it's also trying to encourage females to not be afraid to be intense, or to be in their masculine, or to lift weights. But sometimes it's saying, okay, let's get you information. So when you go into a gym, let's say you have a strategy and a plan about, like, when I go in there, I'm going to do this, this, and this. And by the way, most quote men that dominate the fitness space, if you go to the real brains in the fitness space, and let's say they're, a lot of them are men, it's very different than that muscle and fitness culture. You're talking about people that
Mm.
are movement specialists, doctors, they're into dynamics, um, and they're incredible. Like, they're incredible teachers. They understand the physiology of men and women. It's like, if you really get down to the best people, all that goes away.
Oh, I love that. Gabby, over the years, I kind of want to walk you back and take you back. You made numerous appearances on TV shows, both as a guest and a host. So your dynamic personality and wide-ranging experiences have no doubt contributed to some fascinating conversations and memorable moments on the screen. Can you share any behind the scenes stories or memorable moments from your time as a guest or a guest appearance on various TV shows? Anything that sticks out?
Um, I'm trying to think. That's an interesting question. I mean, uh, when I mentioned I did MTV Sports. And so, for example, there was a very well known basketball player named Dennis Rodman. And I had a tournament myself, but I did a pit stop in Texas when he played at San Antonio to interview him for the day. And then I was going to go on and compete. And he was in Las Vegas gambling when I got there. So, like, this is when he was wearing like a lot of boas and like women's clothing and kind of just having a little fun. I think, I would go in there and I said, okay, well, he can come or not. But in the meantime, I went through his whole closet. I tried on his clothes. So I used to do things like that. I did an interview with Lance Armstrong, and I had to do it on a bike with him in the Peloton at their,
Wow.
like, and I had never clipped in. And so it was my first time clipping in. I'm trying to craft an
Mm.
interview, and these guys in their slow-mo, it's my best day ever, right? So that was always sort of interesting. I almost drowned doing a segment on kayaking, or let me say this, it felt like I almost drowned in Oregon. I met my husband interviewing him, which is,
Wow.
I always try to be really professional. And so that was sort of an interesting twist. Um, and, I mean, I've done some movies. I did a appearance in Gattaca, and that was sort of interesting. But yeah, I mean, there's always something that goes on,
Yeah.
here and there.
Yeah. No,
I
I
had to
love that. Well,
interview,
thank.
if you know Charles Barkley,
Yeah, of course. Of
Sir
course.
Charles.
Yeah.
Well,
Yes.
I know Charles a very long time. When I went to interview him, I knew him already. So, and I'm sensitive to the
Okay.
athletes. And so he was like, okay, well, after practice, then I have to go get treatment. Then I'm gonna have to go in the hot tub, and then I have to get ready. He was gonna play. They were competing that night. So I just went in my clothes. And I go, how about this? When you're in the hot tub, I'll interview you in the hot tub. So you don't have to do two things. And so I just went
Yeah.
in
That's
my
cool.
clothes and sat with him.
Wow. I love that. Wow.
We need
Gabby,
to
I
we
want to
need to
ask.
do this, Anaya, to do interviews in the hot tub. That's something cool.
Yeah. That would definitely be cool. Gabby, thank you so much for your time. I have I have one question for you, and then we're gonna play
Sure.
a very quick game.
Okay.
And so the last question I have for you is, who has been the strongest or most inspiring person in your life, and what lessons have you learned from them?
If you want to talk about kind of non-personal, I'll be honest with you. My husband has been a great example of somebody who really trusts themselves, you know, um, and follows their passions and then believes it will work out. So in that level, Laird has been a constant, and I've seen it up close, so I know
Mm,
it's real. My favorite line that he says to me is, "Hey, everything is going to be okay, and it is okay." Um, from
mm,
from another point of view, I was recently, maybe in the last 6 years or so, introduced to a woman named Byron Katie, and she has a program
okay.
called The Work. And what I would say to people is that this was very interesting for me because I'm not a woo woo person. It's like this: if I understand what's happening, then I will go woo woo. But I just won't go, oh, I want to feel it. Once I understand it, I go,
Yeah.
oh, that makes sense. I'll let it, I'll let go to it. And so what Katie really taught me was how much of everything we're doing is in our own narrative. And she created a program called The Work that really helps us. She's not telling you what to do. If someone tells you they're a guru and they know, I say run. There's
Mm,
just no absolutes. What you want is somebody who plugs into who you are and helps you find your answer
right.
and or your freedom. And so Katie, what I learned from Katie was, she has 4 questions. Is it true? If you ask like all your thoughts, if you just self-inquired about your thoughts and be like, "Oh, well, I don't know if we can do this and is it going to be successful or did they like me or he was mean to me today or whatever it is. Is it true? Can I know it to be true for sure? Who am I when I think those thoughts and who would I be without that belief?" And when we can
Mm,
learn this practice because it's really good with family members, right?
mm,
Is getting ourselves out of our narratives and basically ultimately out of suffering. And I think that's an important one. And she talks about the word should. And she says, whenever we use the word should, like, oh, Vlad should have, let me talk more, we've left reality.
mm.
And so just
Wow.
teaching us personal accountability, but also it gives you kind of a sense of humor about like kind of some crazy stuff that goes on that you don't have to get involved with.
Yeah. Wow. That's actually really powerful. Wow. That's that's incredible. Thank you. Thank you.
I will
Thank
I
you
will
so
not,
much
I
for
will
sharing
never
that.
use the word should right now.
She's a G, but even with our children, listen, I have kids. You guys look too calm to have kids. I don't know if you do or not, but um,
I do 2 kids.
you do? Okay, that's why you got the
Two
cap
kids,
on.
yeah.
You're
One on the way
hiding.
for
You're
me.
keeping it together. Is when you go, "You should," it's like, no, so she said I used to say to her, because I like things very neat, and I'd say, "Katie, what about the socks?" Because we think we're gonna just will it into our kids, like, "I'm gonna make you," And
Mm,
she goes, "Oh, sweetie, you pick up the socks. Then you're the one who wants them up." And she's like, "Then you get the joy of the clean floor." And then she says, basically what happens pretty much if we're modeling, they're probably going to pick up their socks. And the other 2 things for
mm,
parents, she said, I thought was important that we could do is really listen. Don't fix their problems. Just listen. Because we
mm,
do have some answers, and we want to give it to them, but just listen. And she goes, and make yourself happy so they know what it looks like.
mm. Hmm.
I love the
That's
fact about make yourself happy. Actually, this is number one advice I'm giving to my wife like once a month, 100%. Like make yourself happy. So if you are happy, they're gonna be automatically happy because they see because you're gonna be less stressed. It's gonna be less stress on them,
Yeah.
and so on. So I love this
Yeah.
advice.
Yeah.
well.
She
The
says
question for you, I have.
if you want to
No,
change your
go ahead. I'm sorry,
environment,
Gabby. Go
no,
ahead.
no, the last thing, and I won't bring up Katie anymore, is if you want to change your environment, change yourself.
Yeah.
Mm, I love that. All right, let's go ahead and play a quick game called
Okay.
Rapid Fired Fitness. Okay,
Okay.
here you're going to be presented with. Let's see. All right, I'm going to give you 2 options. You have to pick one, and you can only pick one. All right.
Okay.
So, rapid fire fitness, yoga or Pilates?
Oh, they're like almost the same thing. I guess Pilates because you can do resistance.
Okay, trail running or beach running?
Honestly, if you don't live near a beach, you need to trail run, but I like beach if you can be barefoot because I love people liberating their feet and using their ankles and their toes.
Okay, fair enough. Strength training or cardio?
Strength training.
Swimming or surfing?
Not many people have access. If you want to have fun, surf. There's some repercussions. Swimming's great. It's good for your heart.
Morning workouts or evening workouts? Or
Morning.
just work out like 10 times a
Well,
day?
see, that's the
Okay.
thing. Morning because your cortisol level is high, so it's better to do
Okay.
stressful things in the morning, like fire people, have uncomfortable conversations, train,
Mm,
whatever. But if somebody says, "Hey, cool for you, but I work all day," great, then get it done.
mm, fair enough. Okay, and I have 2 more over here. Push-ups or pull-ups?
Both.
And then I have foam rolling or a deep tissue massage.
Well, okay. One costs money, but would be better if the person knew what they were doing.
Fair enough.
Okay,
Yeah.
fair enough. Fair enough. Well, Gabby, thank you so much for your time. We truly appreciate your time and insight. To our listeners, be sure to check out the Gabby Reece Show podcast for much more valuable health and wellness information. And please don't forget to follow Gabby on social media. Gabby, is there anything else that I left out that you want to say?
No, I just want to always remind people that they're really worth it to take that time to invest in themselves and to be healthy. Because, one thing I did hear recently, there's a doctor, Dave Rabin, and he talks about when we are feeling pretty good, that gives us the opportunity to be empathetic. And then we can then be better for the people around us. And so a lot of times we're taught like, oh, I don't have time and all this, just to find the way. I'm not saying it's easy. I know I've had kids.
Yeah.
I've done 8-minute workouts plenty of times. But just that it's worth it. They're
Wow,
worth it.
thank you so much. That is definitely great advice. Thank you so much, Gabby.
Thank you.
Bye. Aloha.
This podcast is sponsored by ArgoPrep, an award-winning edtech company serving over 1 million students nationwide. We understand that as parents, you want to ensure that your child receives the best education possible. Say hello to ArgoPrep. With over 15 plus educational awards earned in just the past year, ArgoPrep's platform offers your child video lessons, quizzes, drills, printable worksheets, and more. Best of all, your ArgoPrep subscription comes included with 4 comprehensive digital workbooks that cover all 4 subjects: math, ELA, science, and social studies. Visit argoprep.com today and start your free trial.